This week on the Nittany Dispatch, we discuss our rewatch of Penn State's win over Bowling Green, including our thoughts on the defense moving forward. This week on the Nittany Dispatch. Hello and welcome to the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Sauber, Penn State beat writer at the Center Daily Times. She is Audrey Snyder of The Athletic. And Audrey, it is an early bye week this year, and we get some little rest and relaxation, but also some nice time to rewatch things and figure out where we stand on this Penn State football team through 2 weeks.
That's right, John. We are 1/6 of the way through the regular season. That's one way to think of it, right?
That is not. Listen, that feels fine right now to have a bye week that early. I feel like by week 9, it's going to be kind of wish this second one was a little later in the year.
Yeah, I think James Franklin probably feels the same way too, right? I think that's, and people have asked like, why are there 2 bye weeks this year? But it's when you get, I guess, when Labor Day falls.
It's something about
it's early.
Essentially, it's about the calendar. It has nothing to do with the expanded playoff, the expanded conferences. It's just happenstance that this is the first year of those things, and this is happening right now. But yeah, it's because Labor Day it's the timing of Labor Day essentially. So they get an extra bye week, and we are in it. And Penn State still barely beat Bowling Green, but as we mentioned, they did in fact beat Bowling Green, and that is important because Northern Illinois took care of business against Notre Dame, and things could be much worse for Penn State fans this week than they currently are.
James Franklin, not even so subtly hinted at that.
Yeah.
Tuesday night, we heard from Franklin. That's the only time he's talking this week. And he said, hey, look around college football. There are a lot of teams that would have liked to have gotten a win last week. I mean, he might as well have just have stared in the camera and been like, yes, Marcus Freeman, I'm talking to you and Notre Dame, right? We all knew what he was getting at. I will say, and I should have brought this up on our post-game episode Saturday, but those game days just kind of, they drag on. And as listeners here know, usually you have no idea what John and I are going to say during those post-game shows.
That's right.
The one thing that I did want to mention, at no point during Saturday's game against Bowling Green did I feel like Penn State was going to lose, right? Maybe it means something, maybe it means nothing. Yes, it was a bad first half from the defense. We saw that live. When I went back and rewatched the game, it was still bad from the defense, but it was very correctable. And you'd hit on that on our post-game show, and you're like, yeah, I didn't think it was that bad. I will say, like, second watch, it wasn't as bad as I thought for the defense. But I wanted to bring up the first point about that I never felt like they were going to lose that game Saturday, because there have been many times covering Penn State for, I think this is my 15th season, where I felt like they could lose games like that. And the reason I didn't feel that way, I think, is because the offense was able to score quickly and consistently at least move the ball, which has not been the case around here in the past. So, yeah, I do think there are lots of questions about the defense this week. We've seen them, we've heard them. We saw the defense a little bit on the field Tuesday night at practice. John, should people be concerned about this defense moving forward?
Before I get into that, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Those 5-star ratings help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button down below. Hit the subscribe button as we now march toward 2,000 subscribers.
And John tries to dodge my question en route to those 2,000 subscribers. No,
I think my answer to this is pretty firm, and was the same that it was post game, right? And that's no. Like, I'm not concerned about this defense. So much of what went wrong in that game was attributable to stuff that players pinpointed in the post game availability, right? Like when they spoke to us, it was, especially Devon J. Thomas talked about, like, guys just kind of being amped up to be in Beaver Stadium for the first time of the year and trying to make that big play, as he put it, to knock someone's lights loose, right? Like, you were trying to make a big play, not the right play. And it seemed like halftime, they all got the message that that's not how they do things. And it corrected, right? Like, the defense had no issues in the second half.
I got to say this now, because if you're watching on YouTube, you will see that John has his glasses on today. And all I'm seeing is the reflection of his glasses. And I'm like, you're talking about knocking people's lights loose, and it looks like your eyes are just...
I'm trying to, like, tilt my head down ever so slightly to limit some of that. It's just not going well. I could stare up like this, and you can stare at you the entire time, the reflection of them. This is why I usually wear contacts when we do this podcast. But no, I think that pretty much everything that went wrong is not an issue, right? Like it's all stuff that they corrected immediately, and that's important too, right? It's one thing to make those corrections, as James always puts it, in the Sunday or Monday like film session. It's another to be able to go into halftime, know specifically what's going wrong, and fix it. And they did. Like I said, the defense had no issues in the second half, no real issues in the second half. It looked like a completely different unit, even without KJ Winston playing in that half. And so I just think it's not a problem. I know people want it to be, maybe not want it to be, but like it's the natural fan reaction to be like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, almost lost to Bowling Green. What's going on here? And I think what's going on is like those games happen for pretty much every team in college football at least once or twice a year. You just have to find a way to win them. Fortunately for Penn State, it was against a team like Bowling Green and not Ohio State, Washington, UCLA, Illinois, a team that they are significantly better than. They can make those corrections and get it taken care of. I would much rather have those happen against Bowling Green and Kent State than those big games later on. This gives you the time to learn from it too. I don't know. I come away from this almost completely unconcerned about the defense moving forward.
If it happens again, it's a problem, right? I think that's,
Yes.
and because it was such a lopsided story in terms of the first half for the defense looked so bad, the second half they really buttoned down and everything looked really pretty sharp. So yeah, I do think like it's not a big issue moving forward. The other thing, and I got into this on my piece on The Athletic, if you want to check that out, I'm sure John's written about it as well at the Center Daily Times over at the CDT, is are there concerns with the pass rush, right? And I think there are because statistically, we're not seeing Abdul Carter stuff the stat sheet like many people expected, right? In our predictions at the beginning of the year, said that my bold prediction was that Denai Dennis Sutton would lead the team in sacks. There's still a chance for that to play out, but right now, both of those guys, statistically, the numbers aren't there. Well, I think something fans should keep in mind after this game was you could see it live, but when you go back to just how quickly Bowling Green's quarterback was getting the ball out, right? Like that
Yes.
quick game was so much of like, we're not going to let these guys go to work. And it took me back to a few years ago when Penn State played Villanova, and I did an embed with the Wildcats and spent the whole week with them, like in their meetings and doing the whole thing. And one of the things that came out of that just kind of stuck with me was, you're sitting there with coaches and they're like, yeah, like we know our offensive tackles cannot hold up this long against these guys, against these edge rushers, right? And I guarantee you, Bowling Green was having the same conversations all week. So you got to find ways to mitigate that, and they did. And James Franklin hit on this Tuesday night at practice as well when he was kind of asked again about the pass rush, and he's not concerned either. And James and I are aligned on a lot of things right now, John. It's interesting, just because I think there's too much talent there. And I do think Abdul Carter's usage is interesting in that we haven't seen him playing linebacker much, right? That was the whole thing of this is going to happen.
That could be happenstance too. They said it would be a week to week
Mhm.
thing. It's only been 2 weeks. I don't know.
And I do wonder how much of this was a closer game than Penn State. Let's put it bluntly. Was a closer game than Penn State's coaches thought. So how much of that maybe impacted the plan? Obviously, they have some injuries at linebacker as well. Like Tamir Robinson is a guy that I thought we'd see more of, but obviously he hasn't been out there. So I think there's just a couple different factors with that. But yeah, I'm not overly concerned with the pass rush moving forward. But on a serious note, there was another how do I say another thing that came up this
Yeah.
week with the defensive line.
Yeah. Mean Vanover was charged with 2 counts of DUI on Monday after an August 8th incident. He was driving under the influence of marijuana. James declined to comment on any internal punishment that they'll be having when he was asked about it on Tuesday evening. Listen, I would be stunned if Penn State just learned about this on Monday, right? Like that's not how these things work. And so I would assume that any punishment that already happened. I mean, Vanover played in both of the first 2 games. I would think it's not going to impact him moving forward. But yeah, it's interesting with this pass rush because I don't know, maybe I am overthinking the pass rush more than I am the overall defense, but I'm a little bit more worried than you are. Yes,
Okay.
Bowling Green specifically, this was not. I don't think it was a. There was almost nothing they could do. Bowling
Mhm.
Green was designing everything. It was a ton of RPOs where either they got rid of the ball on a pass or it was handed off, and like those reads they were making were not long reads either, right? It was always like slants and outs and like situations where Connor Bazelak, the quarterback, could make that decision pretty much after he got the snap, right after he got the snap. Uh, West Virginia, there was, I know James pointed to the times that Abdul Carter was double teamed and everything as like part of him making plays that weren't in the stat sheet, but I still have concerns about his sort of conditioning at the position. We haven't seen him,
Mhm.
hold up for a whole game against a big team like that. We weren't going to learn that this week. We're not going to learn it next week against Kent State. Uh, Probably we'll take the matchup with Illinois to find out more about that. But yeah, the denied Dennis Sutton, I'm not worried about. I still wonder what Abdul Carter is going to look like, and if maybe the plan to use him on a week to week basis at either linebacker or edge could shift more into in the game plan. He's 50% here, 50% there, just to allow him to recuperate a little bit at linebacker. And I know and I've said this before, I know he's putting in effort at linebacker too. It's not like he's just getting a breather at linebacker, but the
Mhm.
muscles he's using are different. He's getting less physical with gigantic offensive linemen when he's lined up at linebacker and can drop into coverage on occasion, where he has been good in the past too. But I don't know. I'm mildly concerned. If it were a scale of 10, I would say probably about a 4 right now. Like not I'm just kind of monitoring it, right? Like just keeping an eye on it, seeing how much success they have against Luke Altmaier in Illinois in a couple of
Mhm.
weeks, seeing how much success they have against UCLA. Uh, USC is obviously going to be the massive test and on October 12th, but yeah, just something I think worth keeping your eyes on right now. Don't be concerned, but just like, hey, if there's something, this could be it.
Yeah, and it is when I talked with Abdul Carter Saturday after the game, I asked him about the transition and like how do you think it's going? What maybe has surprised you? And he's like, yeah, no, nothing surprised me. It's not hard. I just need more. Like I need the reps.
Yes.
So again, I think I would say, John, I'm like a 2 out of 10. If you're
Yeah.
a 4, I'm a 2. So that's interesting.
I
We
have a question to
Go
put
ahead.
you on the
Okay.
spot.
Oh
Does
boy.
anything on this defense reach a level like 6 or 7 concern for you right now?
Does anything reach a 6 or 7? I would put the play of the linebackers at like a 6.
I would
Like,
put the I would be more specific on that. This is what I was going to bring up. I would put the
uh-oh.
play of linebackers not named Tony Rojas and Kobe
Mhm.
King at a 6 or a 7,
Yeah.
because those guys are going to play most of the game. But like when they're not, to be blunt, like Tyler Elsdon and Dom DeLuca have not been good enough.
Mhm.
And Elsdon, there were some issues last year with him with his performance, and he was getting kind of caught in pass plays and on run plays he wasn't able to shed blocks, and I saw more of that against Bowling Green. I think that's a concern when Keon Wiley's out with a long term injury right now, and that was if I had to you know pick someone who was going to be the third linebacker, like essentially the first backup, it probably would have been Wiley. And now you're asking a lot of guys who, Dom DeLuca is a great story and everything, and he's absolutely worthy of being in a rotation at linebacker. But there are going to be games where he gets exposed, and Penn State has to be wary of that moving forward.
Wow, John and I are aligned on something. That's no, but
That's
I
not
do
good.
think and again, like I always like to think of the season like this, right? We're looking at it in bite-sized pieces. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is 1/6 of the regular season. Now, Penn State, like everyone else, reserves the right to improve as the season goes on, right? The team that we saw week 1 against West Virginia probably will not be the same team we see at the end of the year. Um, I wanted to mention KJ Winston. We did not get an update this week on him, so that'll certainly be something that we ask about next week. We will hear from James Franklin again on Monday, coming out of the bye week, getting back to our regular routine. So that will be interesting to see moving forward. Um, as for the offense, Tuesday on the practice field, John, something very rare happened.
Yes, we saw
We
one
s-
on ones.
yes, we saw some one-on-one reps, and I looked around and wanted to be like, "Oh my gosh, did they forget to kick me out of practice? Like, is everyone else still here? Did they forget
Well,
about
that's
me?"
So I was actually on the other end of the field, talking to someone, and I was the only media person down there because when I watch one-on-ones, I like to watch from behind the play, right? Like I just feel like you
Mhm.
get a better
I
view of
like
it.
to go to the other end, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was behind the offense essentially watching, and I like looked around and there was no one near me, and I like looked around one of the posts and saw everyone was still down by like the theoretical line of scrimmage. Like, okay, I'm like still allowed to be in here when this is happening.
Yeah, I was a little surprised in a good way. But one of the things that stood out to me during those one-on-ones, people have asked about Liam Clifford and are they going to get Liam Clifford going? And you and I have said that we've we value Julian Fleming's role in this offense, right? And that so much of what he
Yep.
does was blocking, and they want to get him more involved and all those types of things. Opportunities just have not been there so far for this offense. In fact, John, let me pull up the numbers so I do not butcher this because I've gotten a lot of questions, and I'm sure you have too. Of where is Julian Fleming? Why hasn't he gotten
Yes.
more of this? So here's the thing, right? Penn State's quarterbacks have attempted a total of 38 passes through 2 games. Tyler Warren and Harrison Wallace. I was blanking on Wallace's name. I almost called him Cam Wallace. Tyler Warren and Harrison Wallace have combined for 23 targets. So, also known as a whopping 60.5% of the opportunities, right?
Well,
So,
to put it more bluntly, like that's 15 targets for literally anyone else.
mhm. And this goes back to the point that James Franklin made after the game, and it's something I've written about. They need more plays as an offense, right? Because you got to you got to be better on third downs, which they are not hot on third downs. If we want to pick a level of concern with the offense and something that's maybe standing out there, Penn State's converted 7 of 20 third downs through 2 games, which is 94th nationally. Now, the flip side of that is that they're scoring more points and they're much more explosive than they've been in the past. But third down, something to keep an eye on. But yeah, the opportunities just are not there. So when you talk about Liam Clifford and Julian Fleming, we're at practice Tuesday night and we see Liam Fleming absolutely turn
Liam
someone
Fleming.
around. Oh gosh, Liam Clifford. This is what's happened to me. We see Liam Clifford absolutely turn somebody around, totally torch that person for a touchdown. And James
Yeah,
Franklin was
and
standing there and goes, "Hey, way to go, Liam! A good play." So they're seeing it on the practice field, but again, the reps the reps aren't there for the player I just created named Liam Fleming.
yes, but no, I think that's a good point, right? Like, there's just not a lot of targets for anyone other than those top two,
Mhm.
and frankly, I think you would have said there weren't a lot of targets for Tyler Warren in the first game, right? Like, and
Right.
there were almost none for Trey Wallace in the second. Like, it's when you have that limited number of reps, like Andy Kotelnicki is clearly seeing a flaw and going at it, right, over and
Mhm.
over and over again, and it's continuing to work, and he's not having to go to a changeup or anything like that. So Warren was a massive part of the game plan clearly on Saturday, and I think he said as much that like that what they were doing were presenting opportunities for the tight ends, and I think that'll change from week to week. Yeah, you mentioned Clifford. That I thought he looked really good in that rep, but like I also one guy I noticed too on the defensive side, AJ Harris really is like top flight high end
Mhm.
corner who is going to be excellent as I continue to bang that drum. But yeah, it was nice seeing one on ones for once, and it was nice seeing some of the proof of concept with Clifford. It's one rep, like you don't want to dig too much into it, but he looked good. He still has to deal with whatever bumps and bruises. I believe where he was one of those guys at the end of camp that was dealing with bumps and bruises, and so you have to see him be full go and playing at the highest level. But yeah, I think him and Fleming are both really good complementary pieces to Trey Wallace right now. I still think Fleming is, for my money, the second best receiver on the roster. But I think it's at least a little bit clearer that these guys will have moments this season, right? I think all of the questions are
Mhm.
fair given how it's played out so far, but there will be moments where fans are excited about Liam Clifford and Julian Fleming this year. Let's take a brief break from the podcast and discuss our good friends over at Roback. Roback is a place that Audrey and I have frequented for our athleisure apparel for a few years now.
Yeah.
Somewhere that I don't know of many places I get hoodies from anymore other than Roback. It's their performance hoodies are probably my favorite things to wear. And because they are our good friends, you can get 20% off your first order at Roback with code TND20. That's TND as in the Nittany Dispatch 20. uh, if you go to roback.com and make a purchase. But yeah, Audrey, this is, I mean, I don't know. There's only, you know, we say it time and time again. This really is like the best athleisure apparel that's out there right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna put on my Roback hoodie and lay on the couch during this bye weekend, John. Like this is,
Yes.
I'm gonna wear it and lay on the couch. And I wore it this week to cover practice. I've got several Roback hoodies. Yeah, if you're looking for lightweight performance gear in men's and women's, it is fantastic. So if you want to get a head start on some shopping or birthdays, holidays potentially, I can highly recommend you and I both Roback, whether it's the hoodies, the joggers, the hats. John and I have quite a bit of Roback gear, and we are proud to have them as a sponsor.
Yes, and I will be probably wearing Roback joggers, a Roback hoodie, and a Roback hat when I go to Winston-Salem to watch Wake Forest Ole Miss this weekend. Because listen, it might be a little chilly there, but it's the perfect kind of gear for that too, right? I wear it when it's warm, I wear it when it's cold. It's fantastic. That is Roback, where you can get 20% off your first order with code TND20. Voodoo, one of our favorite places to frequent, whether it's, you know, Audrey and I hanging out with friends, you know, trying to
Wait,
just grab a
John,
drink after.
did you just call me
I
a friend?
Yeah, that was a mistake, wasn't it?
I'm
Uh,
honored.
yeah, well, Diamond doesn't, you know. But whether whether that's wanting to hang out with friends, going to play board games inside, if it's
Bingo.
dreary outside, yes, playing bingo there is always fun. Voodoo has great beer. The vibes are great. The atmosphere is one of my favorites in State College. It's just a nice place to go. Whether you're looking to have a drink and relax, maybe get some work done like we do there too.
Mhm.
It's really excellent.
Yeah, take the laptop, do a little work, drink a good vibes, get a Metmosa. I've done all of those things. I plan to do some of those things this weekend with our good friends over at Voodoo. Definitely a good weekend to get on out, grab a beer, relax a little bit, enjoy this bye week a little bit because the fall moves way too fast around here, and Voodoo is the perfect spot to kind of hang out, enjoy the scenery, and grab a good beer and get some good food too in the Voodoo kitchen.
That's Voodoo Brewing Company, located at 201 Elmwood Street in State College. Back to the show.
Two other things from one-on-ones that impressed me. One, Amari Evans, right? We've seen him throughout these two games kind of come back after last year. He fell out of favor early on for whatever reasons. Um, and it's interesting to watch how James Franklin interacts with him, right? So they took a deep shot to him in one-on-ones, and he didn't come down with the ball, but James Franklin was right there and said, "Hey, Amari, it's okay. I like the way you fought through it. I like the way you fought for the ball," right? And we've heard about this several times that they have a ton of belief in Amari Evans, obviously unique skill set, former high school quarterback. And he's still kind of working through it. And he certainly looks, we've mentioned it since the preseason, looks a lot bigger now than he has in previous years. But it was interesting to see that interaction. And you hit on AJ Harris. And after one rep with Elliott Washington, and I forget who completed the pass in front of him, but Washington was there, and he was standing right next to me because I was kind of again I thought I was left alone there and just suddenly left in practice, and he's standing there like clearly dejected after a rep, and AJ Harris came over to him and he said, hey, like I don't know why you're paraphrasing. I don't know why you did this, but I know you know this. And to me, that was one of those leadership moments that we don't always get to see. And that's important. So I think you look at AJ Harris as, yeah, we both, you and I think this is going to be one of the best transfer portal additions for Penn State when it's all said and done. But the leadership piece to that matters a lot too, and we got to see a little bit of that Tuesday night. So I found kind of both of those things interesting. I will say the mood on the practice field was very light for most of
Yes.
the workout. Now, some of that is because it's an idle week, right? You're not playing somebody this week. I think the other part of it is just that there's excitement about this energy, and Andy Kotelnicki is back there just kind of talking about anything and everything as they're running through practice. At one point, he's quoting Ghostbusters, and I just hear him like Drew Aller's taking a rep, and he's like, "Does anyone know what I'm talking about with this quote?" And like he just keeps going, and I'm like, "Man, this is different than kind of what we've seen in the past." James Franklin playfully got in line for a rep against Caden Saunders, right, and was out there running around. So there's a good mood to it, but then as they shifted into one-on-ones, James Franklin was screaming and yelling and hey, let's go faster. So like again, for if people want to be like, oh, it's not intense, like it certainly was, but I just think
Yeah.
these little
Well,
snippets matter.
and I promise you, physicality has not been an issue in practice preseason and offseason. And that also leads us to another player out with a significant injury. That's tight end Andrew Rapouillet. I think we touched on this post game. I don't remember what all we said
Yeah, because
about it,
he
if I'm
was
being
on
honest.
crutches Saturday, so I
Yeah.
think we talked a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we made it clear where we had presumed, based on what we know and everything, where it was going. And
yeah, because I said if you're on crutches, you're not playing the next week. That MD
and
here, yeah.
Yeah, and James said on Tuesday that it is a long-term injury. Not overly surprising. I don't know what the timeline looks like right now, but I wouldn't expect to see Rapouillet for quite some time. Unfortunate. Looked like he was going to have a chance to be the number 2 tight end for Penn State this year. Khalil Dinkins is still very good. It's just he's been dealing with bumps and bruises, and Rapouillet, I think, had some time to make up some ground there. That being said, Penn State is really deep at tight end. That takes a hit. Obviously, losing Rapouillet right now, you're looking at Warren at the top, and then Dinkins and Luke Reynolds. But you don't want to start dipping too much more into that young group of tight ends at this point, who I don't know if they're ready to play. And Andy Kotelnicki wants to run 12 personnel. He's made that clear. Now, I fully believe that he can work around that, right? Like, they can shift away from 12 personnel, move to more 21, even more like 31. He will work his way around whatever personnel he has available, but never good to lose guys that you expect to contribute. And I think Rapouillet probably was going to be a pretty hefty contributor as the season moved along.
And Chuck Losey, Penn State's strength coach, was asked about this Wednesday. We had Chuck on Zoom, and we're just kind of talking about younger players and who impressed you in the weight room. And he was asked about Drew Aller's mobility and how, they knew this was coming with Drew, that he'd be more mobile. But he was also asked about the injury piece. And is there anything you can kind of put your finger on as to why there seemingly has been, an uptick in things? And Chuck said, listen, sometimes it's just luck of the draw, bad, kind of bad luck type of deal. But James Franklin has said, and you mentioned this, John, he said it several times, that this was a very physical camp, right? And so you don't want to lose a guy like Andrew Rapouillet early on. And I do think because of the length of this season now, right? Because we're talking about if you make the playoff and you go on a run, or if you're in a Big Ten title game, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of these teams be hesitant to rule guys out the rest of the way, just because this season, the national championship game is like January 19th or 20th, something like that. It is longer. But yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing Rapouillet anytime soon.
Yeah. But the rest of the offense, as you said, is rolling right now. Very much a positive for Penn State. I'm curious, on rewatch, was there anything you took away from the offense of this? Because to me, it was it kind of was what I thought it was, right? It was playing really well. I thought they struggled a little bit in the second half, but nothing overly noticeable.
Yeah, I think the offensive line stuff gets interesting. And I asked James Franklin about this Tuesday night, about kind of his evaluation of Nolan Rucci coming out of that. Rucci played 24 snaps, which was significant after we did not see him much against West Virginia. Cooper Cousins had six snaps. I almost said 6 sacks, 6 snaps with the offense as well. So I think you're being able to build depth, which is good, right? That's going to be important as the season rolls along. But Franklin did hit on, there were things that they thought would happen. Presumably they thought Penn State would be up big, and that rotation and the distribution would look a little bit different. But after there not being much of a rotation week 1 with that offensive line, we did see more of Rucci, which was interesting. Something else and it stood out to me live, but I wanted to go back and get the numbers on this, and it's up on my piece on The Athletic, but Penn State is 4th nationally in explosive play rate per True Media, with 21.6%, 21.6 of the team's plays going for chunk gains. Now, to be clear, True Media categorizes explosive plays as receptions of 16 plus yards and rushes of 12 plus, which Penn State's internal metrics are slightly different on the yardage. But for comparison,
are they?
Yeah, they're, I believe, 15. I think 15 and
I thought it was 16 and 12.
No, it used to be 16 and 12.
I have
and
this.
I asked Andy
I have
about
this written
it.
down somewhere.
Oh yeah, I asked about it for a reason, John, back in the summer. But now it's in my notes. I want to say it's 15. for passing for them. But again, well, I could be wrong, but regardless, my point stands. Last season, Penn State ranked 103rd in explosive play rate at 10.5%. So again, 2-game sample size, drastically better. Another thing that stood out to me just from a numbers standpoint, Drew Allers completed 9 of 14 pass attempts for 253 yards with 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. And the numbers I'm referring to, are on passes thrown 15 plus air yards, right? So this goes back to the whole we need to take more shots, the quote unquote chuck it deep discourse that happened. Last season, the 13-game sample size, he was 23 of 63, 611 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 1 pick. So again, you look at the trajectory that they're on now, Aller is going to far exceed those deep shots from last year, and they're more explosive. And now, John, are we both going to scramble through our notes to find the explosive play numbers? Because I might.
I've been trying to, but I can't find it. It is what it is. It's only a yard difference either way. But no, I think like Drew Aller is clearly making strides in that regard, right? Like he is, I don't know, he just looks more confident and willing to either trust guys downfield or trust himself to get the ball where he needs to, which I think is probably the more important aspect. I know the conversation last year was trusting a receiver to make a play, but I think a big part of that is trusting yourself to put them in position, right? Like to make that play, and trusting that you can get the ball to the area that you need to. I think he's done that. Like the interception he had against Bowling Green, like, I don't know. I don't care, right? Like that was, to me, it could have been consequential. It didn't end up mattering. It was just a misread. You know, it wasn't anything indicative of a long-term issue, I don't think.
That's going to be our tag for the show. Drew Aller's interception. I don't care. And it was, and I took some flack for this from the good people on X, because I called him Jalen Aller just because Hurts the pick was in the end zone, and that's where I was framing it. And then I angered Eagles fans, as I probably tend to do, just with my
Eagles fans who were celebrating a win this weekend, I believe.
Unlike, yeah, that's John. I've turned the page. I'm focused on going 1-0 each week.
Yep, focusing on Malik Willis playing quarterback. Is that what we're doing?
Actually, no. I was focusing on finding the explosive play numbers in my notes, and I did find them. Penn State, Andy Kotelnicki categorizes explosive gains as rushes of 12 plus yards and passes of 15 plus. So I think I was right, John.
Yeah, you were, but yeah. I disagree with.
I just had to check my facts here. It's 1 yard difference. It does not mean much, but because I'm a fact checker, as we know, I just wanted to get that. Now I'll be able to sleep during this bye weekend. I got that out of my system.
Right. Yeah, that is, as we know, what would have kept you up all this week.
Not Malik Willis.
No, that's right. Definitely not the fact that you're going to have to watch Malik Willis start a game at quarterback. But no, I think, we've touched on a lot of the main points of that Bowling Green game, right? Like fans can safely put it in the rear view. Maybe you disagree, but I don't think my projection is worse for what Penn State is. You know what I mean? I don't expect them to be worse than I did at the beginning of the year. If anything, like I view this team more positively than I did prior to West Virginia. And that game against Bowling Green didn't really do anything to hinder that.
It was just I think it was just nice, John. It was nice for them to give us an extra week to really have something interesting to talk about, right? Because if they would have beaten Bowling Green like 55-3, what would we have talked about this week?
Probably all the backups that we got to see.
All my Cam Wallace projections, your Ethan Grunkemeyer pick, all the stuff we talked about.
All of the minutia that you and I deeply enjoy. But no, I think that is probably a good place to leave it, right? This is it's a little bit of a break this early in the season for Penn State. Should make things a little bit easier heading into Kent State, where that's a home game for Penn State against one of the worst teams in the country. A game that I know, like Bowling Green is like a mid-level to high-ish level MAC team. Kent State is arguably one of the worst teams in FBS football, and not even statistically one of the worst teams in FBS football. And this should be, if this game is close, then there's cause for concern.
Yeah, there will be cause for pause. If Penn State has challenges next week. That I will say though, I mean, as much as people want to talk about schedules and how unfavorable they can be, poor Kent State, right? My friend Chris Vanini has them ranked as team 134 in his 134th team ranking. Kent State plays Tennessee this weekend and then turns around and plays Penn State, right?
To be fair, I'm sure they're being paid
Cash
handsomely
those checks. Absolutely. Cash
Yeah.
those checks. But man, that is a rough go around for Kent State. And there is a time, we'll get into this a little bit more next week, but former Penn State offensive line coach Matt Limegrover is at Kent State.
Yep.
It's been there the last few years. Obviously, Kent State has their coaching staff has a lot of ties to PJ Fleck, formerly their staff has ties formerly from Minnesota. PJ Fleck is still at Minnesota, to be clear. But yeah, if you're looking to kind of as a fan get a good look at Kent State this week, you can watch them play Tennessee if you'd like. I brought this pennant here, John, so you can get prepared if you want.
That's right. Our favorite Tennessee student on this podcast, Audrey Snyder.
That's right. Our favorite 35-year-old graduate student is here. Yeah.
Yes. But no, they also they played Pitt. They got destroyed by Pitt. They played St. Francis, PA, and lost that one, which I think is a good indicator.
Barometer. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. As Audrey said, she has plenty of work up at The Athletic. I have the same at centerdaily.com. If you would like to read our stuff, go there and find that. You can find Audrey on Twitter at OddSnyder4. You can find me at John Sauber. Like I said earlier in the podcast, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button down below. Hit the subscribe button. Stare at the fact that you can see my laptop screen in front of me, or not even a laptop, my monitor in front of me.
I've been trying to see it all show, John. What are you looking at?
Moving my head enough here that you can't.
Actually, no, I can see the reflection of our show. Yeah.
Yes, and if I look right, you can't.
You got
see.
my good side.
Most of the stuff that I'm looking at, I put on my second monitor, so you can't see it with the direct reflection here. I at least had some thought into this, but that's a good place to leave it. We will be back next week when we are prepping for Penn State, Kent State, an electric game that yes, we will all be thrilled to cover. I will actually be thrilled to cover it. It's a very fun job. But until then, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.